Welcome to the Relationship Toolbox, a show about the skills we need to maintain good relationships with others. Today we're going to talk about how to communicate with someone who has dementia, specifically Alzheimer's.
And in order to be better communicators about this, we've invited two guests with us today, and we are so grateful to have Anna Lang and Katie Fredette with us to talk about this topic, and they're bringing their expertise. So I guess it would be important to clarify right off the bat what this term means. Is there a difference between dementia, because we hear dementia and we hear Alzheimer's? I'm imagining there's a difference so that they're not synonymous. And if so, can you also tell us if there's a different way that we would communicate and interact with a person who has dementia versus someone who has Alzheimer's?
Dementia is an umbrella term used for various cognitive issues, memory, thinking, and behavioral issues. Alzheimer's disease is a sub of that. It's the most common form of dementia that we all hear about, accounting for 60 to 80% of all. The communication is pretty much the same across all aspects. In all, there's about 100 different types of dementia. So the communication would be about the same, and it's all about validation, adapting to the individual's needs, and definitely patience and approach and how you interact and walk up, making sure that you get eye contact and having them acknowledge that you're there before you proceed.
So those are kind of best practices for
All
a lot of
communication.
All communication.
But we're going to talk about some factors that may be specific to this as well.
And maybe we should state at this point too that there will be a second show following this, which will be on the caretaker of someone with Alzheimer's. So if you wonder about some of those questions, we're going to get to that in another show. But right now we're going to be focusing on Alzheimer's itself and how it exhibits itself. So I guess I'd like to share some of the questions that we've heard from other people, as well as from our own experience with family. I've had some family members with Alzheimer's. So if we could just sort of start with those, and we'll pose some of these questions and then fill in our audience on some information. So one of the ones that I remember when my father had Alzheimer's was he kept saying, "What's wrong with me?" And the doctor at the time, this was years ago, said to my mother, "Don't tell him." And I felt so frustrated as he seemed to be saying, "I don't understand what's wrong with me." How should we respond to a question like that from someone who has Alzheimer's?
We always tell people there's nothing wrong with them. We don't want to remind them that they have that for a diagnosis. I mean, we validate how they're feeling and their emotions, because they still have every single emotion that we do. We say something to the fact where I see you're feeling confused, that you're right there for them and that you'll get through it together.
So it's not so much about the label, but about meeting the conditions in the moment.
It is.
If they were to be told you have something called Alzheimer's, do you think they would even retain it? And I mean, would it be helpful in that way, or do you just avoid that altogether and, as you say, focus on the symptoms that they're experiencing?
I personally would avoid that. And it all depends on how far along everything is in that disease process as well. Validation is the biggest piece. I can see this is frustrating for you. Or I see you're struggling with that. Let's do this together. Those are like key words to not trigger.
Okay. So when you're talking about validation, Anna, you're talking about giving them a word for what they are experiencing.
Yes.
The frustration or anger or confusion. So you're putting a label on it for them.
Absolutely, not considering it a behavior, so to speak, but a feeling.
Feeling, not unlike we do in
was gonna
conflict,
say,
you know, being curious about how somebody is coming at us. So,
And we often say that you really can't work even with conflict until you start labeling what you are feeling, so I know whether it's
respond,
anger,
yeah.
resentment, or something, so that you can be then given an approach to it that matches whatever the feeling is.
Yeah.
So another question, when someone with Alzheimer's continues to do dangerous things like working on the stove, turning it on, and forgetting. And so I might say to them, don't use the stove, we'll cook whatever you need and so forth. And they just ignore that and continue to use the stove, and it's dangerous. How do we handle that?
So there's a few things you can do there. You can offer to help. Let's cook this meal together. Let's use the microwave for this. Or you can disable the stove altogether, unplug it, use a different source. But the key is focusing on what they can do, not what they can't. So reinforce what they can. If they can help in the cooking process, something safely, have them do that and assist. That is the best practice there, because you don't want somebody getting hurt.
Okay. And in this, I guess this would be a form of the same question. If you're trying to help someone, maybe they're putting on their clothing and they're getting all mixed up, and they're getting agitated. Again, what do you do when you say, let me help you, and they get angry at us?
We've had, my father-in-law also, he lived with us for 2-3 years with Alzheimer's. And so I've also, as a nurse, I've been a nurse for 30 years in this multiple different various fields with dementia. And we don't want to take away their independence. As long as they are able to do something, we let them do it. It might be a little bit longer that it takes them to do it, and they might struggle a little bit. If some people with dementia, Alzheimer's, will balk at doing something. Water's a big thing for them. So I usually will take them by the hand and say, let's do this together. We're going to do this together. And I will usually start the process. And then I will, like, if we're going to brush your teeth, I will usually put the toothpaste on so it saves a step. And small directions. We only do one direction at a time. And we hand them the toothbrush and let them do, because it's automatic for them. They will just automatically, with a toothbrush in their hand, they'll
Sort
put
of
it
a
in
motor memory then?
Yes, yep.
Did you say that they have reactions to water?
They do. A lot of,
Can you tell us about that? I hadn't heard that before.
oh yes. They have a few different idiosyncrasies, but water is a big one. You'll find a lot of times people with Alzheimer's, we've had some people that have worked in the field that will just automatically want to just say, we're going to go take a shower, or do you want to take a shower? And first thing they're going to do is say, no, no. But if you take them by the hand and say, we're going to go get cleaned up, they don't need to know there's water involved to begin with. Let's get them to that first. It's also about one step at a time. And you bring them to the bathroom or you bring them to a sink, and I find it's the same thing like the toothbrush. You get the washcloth ready, you hand them that washcloth, and they will do more for themselves.
So I guess some of the frustration and the unknown piece about taking care of folks in our family is that it's not just a cognitive thing. It becomes a physical, Alzheimer's in particular, can become a physical thing. So how do you validate and maintain dignity, but then there are like hygiene things like toileting and showering? How do you support that without, there's an asymmetry in this relationship too, where you might have been partners or equals or siblings or a spouse, or even with a parent, you're reversing roles. How do you navigate that?
It is a hard thing to navigate. it's the patience, it's the validation, it's all the things, the physical approach, it's everything. It's like Katie said, it's one step at a time, it's doing it together. The reassurance, like if they have an accident because they're incontinent, let's get you cleaned up, and it's the one step at a time, one instruction at a time. The beautiful part about what you do is that the memory is only going to last for so long. So if you get resistance, you get the no, you wait a little while, you can redirect as long as they're safe, and you try again. The key is patience.
So you should be prepared that things are going to take much longer than they used to. So in social gatherings, because you don't want to isolate people, I assume as well, how do you inform others who may not be in their day-to-day life of what they're going through, particularly if they don't recognize somebody that they used to have a relationship with, or they can't come up with a name, which I do more and more all the time, and it makes me kind of crazy. It's like, how do you inform and bring others into that circle in a supportive way?
You have a conversation around that, not necessarily in front of the person that has this, but beforehand. If it's a child, an adult, Susie's struggling with some memory issues right now. She might not remember your name, but she's going to remember the way you made her feel. These are some things that you might see that are happening. But deep down, there's a part of them that knows who you are. They might not be able to say it, but for the most part, there's something there that they know.
Subjectively, they're picking it up, yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably the hardest part about the whole thing. It doesn't just affect the person, it affects the whole family. It affects your friend, it affects everyone.
Well, going back to that incontinence thing, one of the things that I've heard about is that knowing, should I dare take this person out to a restaurant, because what could happen? And the natural hesitancy sometimes to get involved with that, because it's easier to stay at home then, but then that's more isolating. And also, is there some way to help someone who's having difficulty with that realize before they're having an accident? Are there ways of sensitizing them that do you even have them go to the bathroom more frequently if they don't have to necessarily? And again, what does that do in terms of validation of them and the way they're treated?
Well, I can answer that from personal experience also. It's a matter of if you're going out for dinner or going anywhere, really, we put it anywhere. You know how long you're going to be gone for approximately. And I would always say, I have to go to the bathroom before I leave. Why don't you you go first, and then I'll go right after you.
Okay.
So we always make that a planned thing right before we go.
So you're sort of modeling the behavior then.
Yes. Yep. It's worked. And like I said, whether you're going to be on for 2 hours, if you're going out for dinner.
Right.
And most of the time, depending on what stage of the dementia, Alzheimer's they're at, some of them still have that control. When they start to lose that control, most of the time they're wearing incontinence supply. Right. Depends or whatever.
Yeah. And going back to that question about social things, one of the things I heard about was, I think from the Alzheimer's Association, that they have cards that they can give people, a spouse or someone with Alzheimer's, in a social situation to give to people that says, my spouse has Alzheimer's, he may repeat things or whatever. Yes. Are you familiar with that, and how do you feel about that?
I have never seen those in person, but I have heard about them also. Yeah. And I think that would be a good idea if, depending on what the social situation is. But if you've got friends, most of your friends that you're interacting with or would bring them around pretty much know already. you know, you're
What the
taking
score
care
is,
of
yeah.
your spouse that's got dementia.
Uh-huh.
And most of them, what I have found is most of those people that are in your circle, let's put it that way,
Yes.
are very kind about this whole situation. And some of them have been there themselves, so they know.
Okay.
Those cards, they might be good if you're interacting with somebody who just might not know, or because there's still, you know, there's still a lot of people out there that don't have a clue how to.
Right, or didn't realize.
Really, yes.
Yeah. Especially if a family has tried to keep it hidden.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a shame that there is shame about this as
Yes.
well. But
Yeah.
there is about a lot of family issues. How do children handle this? Do you have a particular way? Do you see that they handle it better or worse or at different ages? Like, how do you bring your young people in?
So they're observing the Alzheimer's person, the behaviors, and wondering, what's this about? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do
And
you?
they don't have the life experience maybe that an adult does. They may be a little bit more self-focused. They can also be compassionate, more so than some adults. So what are your suggestions about
How do you explain it to them?
preparing them to interact and to support the family member?
I can answer that one also. I can tell you, I had 3 young children at the time my father-in-law, their grandfather, lived with us. And it was tricky, but you do explain it to them. Grandpa's got, or grandma's got some memory issues. They don't remember like you and I do. And most of the time, I mean, maybe I would say under 5, they wouldn't understand how to, you know, the difference. But I think I had the 3 girls, and they were like 9, 11, and 13. And I'm like, you know, Grandpa needs extra support. And they usually love children. I've never seen one that doesn't, unless they're in the later stages and they get a little bit combative more. But they love spending time with the kids, and they'll do things. My girls would go turn the radio on for the grandpa, and he'd sing at the top of his lungs, and just explaining to the kids that we are living our normal life. It's just we're including grandpa with everything, and he's enjoying everything. That it's almost like he came back to life a little bit when he came to live with us. It's a timing thing, and you just can't. They're not like you and I that will be 100% responsible on their own. It's almost like going back a little bit and remembering.
What it was like with children who
Yes.
had some dependency.
Do you ever get children who have a fear reaction to it, not so much of the person, but saying, is this going to happen to me, or is this going to happen to you too? Do you get any sense of that occurring in your
I have that
experience?
fear.
Yeah. As the older we get, yes.
Yes, and same thing. My husband has that major fear. He says, "Am I going to be like my dad?" And I'm like, "You know what? It's okay if you are.
Yeah.
It's okay. We'll deal with it."
And you're saying there are hundreds of different nuances of dementia, and that this is a real prominent kind. It is something that maybe we need to normalize. I think we're not comfortable with aging and dying, period. And then when you add the layer of some kind of a condition on top of it, it's harder. But hopefully there'll be more knowledge and treatments. But I hope that if I'm in that situation, we've normalized it and people understand how to do it.
Another question I hear a lot from people, it's sort of who are caring for someone with Alzheimer's. It's sort of an annoyance statement. They say, how many times do I have to tell them the same information? Where are we going? Why did you do that? Who is this person? So what is a way, and maybe we'll get more into that when we're talking about the caregiver, but how would you suggest responding to someone who is asking the question over and over again?
As a teacher, I would be well primed for that because I did that all the time. It's like, okay, and you just kind of
And those
were
are the
patient,
students, right?
and you were just like repeat it and with a smile and with joy. But I don't know what your method would be.
Kind of similar. It's very much validating their feelings, because they know that something sometimes is off or isn't right, and
Yeah.
they get frustrated. And acknowledging that frustration is key. Like, I can see that's very difficult for you. Do you want to do this together? Let me help you. Little simple commands, and then you can always redirect to something that they like, something that's familiar to them. That works a lot.
Do they ever ask, why can't I remember this?
They do, and kind of like what Katie said too. It's just, I have those days too where I can't remember things, and so it's validating their feelings that it's normal for everybody to go through some things like that. To maintain their dignity and to just validate their feelings, and then kind of go on from there, whether they agree or whether you have to redirect to something else, like let's listen to some music that brings them joy, or let's watch your favorite show, or let's cook a meal together, to bring that back around. So it's hard.
It sounds very similar again to what we've talked about with regular communication with people in times when there's maybe conflict or differences of opinion, that showing some empathy for the person's feeling, even though you may not agree with them.
Yeah.
In this case, you're empathizing with their feeling, even though you don't have the same problem with it. It's what you're advocating them for.
You were talking about that your father-in-law kind of came back to life, or had a kind of a boost when he came to live with you. Are there special strategies for folks who might want to just isolate and withdraw, like in their room, or how do you help that come about?
Or not want to get up in the morning, just sleep.
Finding things that they enjoy, tapping into that long-term memory when you know them really well, the things that they used to do and the things that they love. They might not be able to do it the exact same way. My husband's grandfather had cognitive issues as well. He was in World War II. He had shrapnel that was blocking some of his blood vessels, so his was a little bit different, but yet very much the same, and he loved to garden. And so we knew, because he was legally blind as well, that he couldn't make it outside to do a garden per se, so you get creative, and we had the little window boxes that we used, and he was able to plant like lettuce and stuff. So tapping into those memories, the things that they enjoyed, and finding another way to do it where it's safer for them, gives them motivation. It keeps them busy. It helps keep them awake and give them purpose.
What about the use, Anna, of old movies, that take them back 15,
Yes.
20
And
years?
music, I've heard, also
Yes.
can like
Do you
trigger
advocate
something.
the use of that as a way of kind of helping them to feel in touch with life again and still?
Absolutely. We actually lived one summer with my husband's grandfather, and one of the things we would do when he was having a dark day, we put on Charlie Pride, and
Yes.
my kids were there too, and they were little. There were about, I think, 7 to 8 in between there, and we'd put that on, and even though he was legally blind, you'd see his feet start to go, and he'd start to hoop and holler, and then once in a while he'd get up and grab one of the kids and try to dance. It was probably one of the best things to see them smile, to see them come back to that memory or whatever it was about that song or a movie, that helps bring them back around. Those things can do wonders.
Yeah. My father had quite a sense of humor that
Yeah.
we were amazed at how it engaged with it. One other question I have, and this is, you talked about the progression of the disease. How do you know at what point I need to take other measures to deal with this family member, which might be institutionalizing or getting some additional help? What are some things that I should be looking for?
my opinion, is when you're starting to feel overwhelmed. As soon as you start to feel overwhelmed, frustrated, or not understanding what you're seeing, is the time to talk to your family members, talk to the community. There's Council on Aging. There's so many places. There's respite. There's all the provider, to get as much resources and help as you need, because everyone progresses at a different pace.
Yes.
That is a perfect segue for when we get together again, because we've brought up so many great strategies, but I can imagine that it is amazingly stressful and that there's burnout as well. So the next time we get back together, we're going to be talking about how to build capacity and resilience in ourselves as care providers, just like when we are going through a divorce or raising children, and we kind of try to avail ourselves of the information to bring our best self. So Anna Lang and Katie Fredette, we thank you so much for giving us a kind of a glimpse of some of the strategies of engaging and communicating with folks who are navigating Alzheimer's. And we hope that you will come back and enjoy the Relationship Toolbox very soon, and we will be back with some tips and strategies for care providers in these situations too.